You're listening to Arsenal Pass, a flesh and blood podcast for players by players. And all about strategy, leveling up, and the latest news in the world of Wraith. Welcome to Arsenal Pass.
Welcome back, everyone, to episode 31 of Arsenal Pass. I'm Brendan Patrick, joined always by calling champion Hayden Dale. Hayden, how are you doing?
Brendan, I'm pretty good.
Yeah. So today we'll be doing a recap of the Calling Orlando as well as the U.S. National Championship that happened last weekend. This event was my first time actually meeting Hayden in the flesh and blood, and we're going to be recording this podcast in person for the first time. So Hayden is sitting right next to me. But anyway, it was a really long weekend, a lot of great events. We had a fantastic time, but might be a longer podcast. So let's kick it off and get into the news.
Yeah, let's do it. So we're sitting at the table here. We can read the news together for the first time. We kick it off. We had a bit of an amendment from last week. We talked about the supplemental set, and we thought there was going to be some information that came out in Orlando this weekend at the National Championship alongside the Calling. It's actually November 16th, not November 6th. So got that a little wrong. So the more information on the supplemental set is coming out, as it sounds like end of next week, following Monday. I imagine that's going to be dates, set card numbers, usually the set facts that come out before preview season starts and a date for preview season. So a little bit of an amendment to last week's pod and time in the round where we did talk about that. Didn't have quite the right information, so I just wanted to go back and confirm that. Next on the news, though, just want to start with a big congratulations to Tarek Patel, who is now the US national champion, the first ever United States Flesh and Blood national champion, taking it out yesterday as we record. And of course to Michael Hamilton, who won the Calling as well. So just a massive weekend here in Orlando. We've been, of course, with Flesh and Blood with the Calling and Nationals. It was pretty surreal to be in the building as a national champion and a Calling champion were both crowned. So big shout outs to them. Wanted to say as well, there were 10 national championships over the weekend. So not just the US national championships that, of course, Brendan was playing in, and I was here as well playing in the Calling. But we had Germany, we had Austria, we had Malaysia. So there was a lot of national championships happening around the world this past weekend. And so just want to say a big congratulations to all of the, those that top aided, those that won. I believe that, for the top cut, I think in any national championship, you get a PTI, right? So that's a pretty important thing for those that made the top 8 at nationals, and also went on to, of course, claim their trophy and become, for most of them, I think outside of Malaysia, I think Malaysia maybe had theirs last year. These are the first time crowning a Flesh and Blood national champion in these countries. So the inaugural national champions, which is a cool thing.
Yeah, and continuing on with events, big shout out to Mr. Zach Bunn, won the Pro Quest on Sunday. So last event of the season, last chance to get his PTI. Did go, I think it was it 9-0 to go undefeated, get his Pro Tour invite. So super excited for him. I actually put up a video on Twitter if you want to see it, capturing the moment when he wins. It's pretty great. But anyway, on the Arsenal Pass YouTube channel, we did have a new gameplay go up. It's Kano versus Dorinthia, as well as a Viserai deck tech video. So Viserai, just quickly want to say, looking very good in the current meta. You'll see Matt Rogers powered it to a pretty good finish. I think he got 3rd or 4th in the Calling. And it also kind of beats up on that, ever popular Lightning Briar deck. And here, just want to obviously shout out to all the patrons. It's been amazing so far. Tons of support, climbing over around 300 at this moment. So just incredible. If you're not familiar, Arsenal Pass does have tons of extra content over on Patreon. So like I said, with the Viserai deck tech, we, over on the Patreon, we do have, the sideboard guide, deck notes, theory, all that kind of stuff. So everything you need to pick it up and start being competitive, as well as exclusive podcasts and a live session every month. And finally, we did meet a lot of patrons in person for the first time, so that was pretty cool. That
was awesome. That was actually, one of the highlights of my weekend was meeting, our awesome listeners, viewers, and patrons, of course. And we had a meetup on Sunday evening with a few of our patrons just down the road from the event center. So got to chat a bit more and catch up, and I'm sure in the future we'll do that again. It was a great opportunity just to meet and see people outside of the venue. It's a bit hectic inside the venue at times. There's a lot of things happening, going between rounds, things like that. But yeah, just want to say a big thank you and a big shout out to all those that came and said hello and made me feel so welcome here in Orlando as well. My first time playing a North American Calling for Flesh and Blood. I definitely felt like I was here at home. So thank you.
Yeah, and following up on the playmats, all of the US playmats have been shipped out. Hayden, the playmats are en route to Australia, I still think, and Dante is going to be helping me out with the Canadian one, so those will be out this week, and then Europe goes out this week as well. But most of the people in the US should have their mats by now.
Yeah.
And yeah, so take a look. Keep an eye out for it if you haven't gotten it.
Yeah, exactly. Watch your mailbox.
Should have tracking on all the US ones and domestic. All right, Hayden, what do we have for Command and Cookout today?
Yeah, of course. I mean, fire up the grill Brendan. Come on the balcony right here in Orlando. We're actually revisiting a question for the Command and Cookout this week, where we actually had a question. So about 2 or 3 pods ago, maybe 4 pods ago, we had a question from John. And John was asking about, just the design philosophy of Runeblade and whether it was like positive or a negative thing for the game. And a special shout out, from John to Briar. John called out, in his testing that seemed like Briar was maybe, a bit oppressive in class constructed and blitz. And so asked us about that. And we answered that. And I think we talked through just kind of the design philosophy of Runeblade and where we saw it in the game and what we thought of it. And I guess a little bit of the history of Runeblade. And of course, we did have the Runeblade pod last week, part 1. And next week we will have part 2, right, Brendan, of the Runeblade pod.
Yep.
So we're following that up. But in between, of course, we are talking about the weekend that's just been in Orlando. However, in the Command and Cookout, I did want to revisit this question because it's a bit of a hot topic right now, is the power of Runeblade, the power of Briar. And I think that actually we were talking about this last night, we were talking about this morning, that we think it's probably really important that we come back and have a conversation about Briar and revisit this question. I'm just going to jump basically straight into it and say that I don't think that there's an issue with Briar in this format. I actually think that this format right now, this class constructed format, is like the healthiest Flesh and Blood class constructed format we've had. We can explain, why I think that is, and Brendan may agree or disagree. I think Brendan mostly agrees. But we're looking at we had 10 national championships over the weekend, and yes, Briar did represent in all of these national championships and did well. Of course, won the US national champs. But let's forget that it did not win the calling, a 520 odd person event that happened this past weekend. Briar didn't win it. Oldtime won that event. And there's a reason for that. There was an Oldtime player that took that on, the former Michael, who worked on that Briar matchup, played a deck and made a choice based on Briar. Plus there's other decks in this format that, people came in actively targeting Briar. The toughest thing, I think, right, Brendan, is that we've had a week post-UK Nationals for people to try and work this out, right? So, yeah, Lightning Briar was talked about, and there were some formative lists out there with the ProQuest the week before, 2 weeks before in Cincy. But, in terms of the actual deck list that ended up coming out at UK Nationals and the one that's been widely adopted, people only had a week to I guess, respond to that and find a deck to beat it, and also still be able to beat other decks. Because, yeah, you can beat Lightning Briar, and it was around, I think, 25%, 20%, maybe 30% actually at Nationals.
A little over 25%.
Yeah. That's 1 in 4. So if you play a Briar on average 1 in 4, you've got to play 3 other decks, and you've got to beat those other decks. So if you have a strategy that you come in with that beats Briar, but you lose to Bravo, you're weak to Bravo, you're not great against Bolton, or whatever else is kind of sitting around there, it's gonna be tough for you to pull it out and get to that top 8, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Hayden. So I definitely actually very much agree with you in the regards to Briar. So we did see it looks like an unhealthy representation, but you look at the results from UK Nationals, you look at just what is the deck trying to do. It's proactive, it's linear, and it's relatively simple. It's still complicated in kind of the micro gameplay, but the overall game plan is pretty straightforward. So anybody can really pick it up. It's mostly commons and rares, except for a few key cards. And yeah, there's just low barrier to entry, and you could probably perform with it if you picked it up. So it made it very attractive for a lot of people. That being said, this is not like Chain. If you look at Chain and Monarch, you just could not target Chain. Chain just kind of beat everything. But I think that if you talk to most of the top players that were on this Briar deck, I've gotten an overwhelming answer that, yeah, Briar it's very, very good, but it's a deck that can be targeted. We have things like Ice. We saw an Ice Lexi in the top 8. We have things like Oldtime, which won the calling. And there's obviously the Viscera deck, Matt's deck specifically was teched to beat Briar. That was the deck he was preying on. So I think as we move forward, we'll see the Briar representation go down. But I totally agree with you. This is definitely the healthiest format I've ever been a part of, I think. Maybe you can consider Welcome to Wraith healthier, but a smaller card pool. But right now, very much kind of rock, paper, scissors. And I think that the meta will just keep evolving as we keep moving forward. That being said, I always will hold the reservation back that maybe people just will keep playing the same stuff, which is fine, because we do have supplemental set right around the corner.
Yeah, well, like any healthy meta and any meta gets to a point, right, where a deck becomes so much, of the majority of the meta that, if your deck loses to, say, decks number 2 and 3 in the meta, you're probably still better to play the deck that loses to 3 and 3 but beats 1, or maybe it is good against 1. You have a 50-50 versus 2, but you're soft versus 3. Like those sort of decks like rise and fall, right? Because the meta naturally evolves, and we're going to see that. Like I have no doubt we're going to see that. We already started to see some of that this weekend. Like I know Nationals on Saturday, Lexi was pretty unrepresented, but I was walking around the top tables at Orlando. There was Oldtime there. There was Lexi, and then on the calling on Sunday at the top 64 cut, there was multiple Lexies and Oldtimes ice decks that were looking to prey on this Briar, as well as Viscerai decks. And even the Viscerai deck that we put out last week, that deck has a favorable matchup in my opinion into Briar. Viscerai just naturally plays well into Briar, for instance, so into the Lightning Briars, that is. So yeah, I don't have any fears about this this current format. I actually think it's exciting. I think this is the start of what a healthy meta should look like. You have, as Brendan said, a really linear strategy that starts out dominant, and then the format responds to that, and then you start to have a much more diverse meta because of it, because decks start to prey on that. Say like Alexi, an Oldtime, a Viscerai, even builds of Bravo can really prey on this this Lightning deck. And then you have decks that adapt to that, right? You have maybe some mid-range decks or some value decks. Dash, for instance, it becomes a more popular option because of how it can play into those decks. So
yeah, I mean, Prism starts to fade out of the format potentially, and that allows Dorinthia to come back in. I mean, it just constantly evolves. But just going back to the beginning of the question, like Runeblade designs, right? It's interesting because the chain dominance in Monarch was, I think, a fundamental kind of design flaw.
Yeah, agree.
But we've somewhat solved that probably at this point. And I think we're just in a space right now where, yeah, obviously the Briar strategy is very, very good and well positioned at this very moment. And then Viscerai is well positioned against that. And then Chain is also very good into Lightning Briar. It's one of Lightning Briar's worst matchups, actually. So, yeah, we are in sort of a good place. It's a good time to be a Runeblade, but is the fundamental design kind of, maybe stretching it a bit for the game? I don't think so, but it does seem to be their marquee class. It is a class that kind of does, what are the most unique things in the game, I would say. So, it's probably going to keep, it has the deepest card pool, right? So it has the most potential to kind of become degenerate or become broken, but I strongly do not believe that is where we are right now.
Yeah, I mean, the problem with Chain, right, is that you had, first of all, like, there's a lot of problems with Chain. I think the design of the hero chain, printing that hero ability to just give natural go again is a bit of an issue. Briar, you have to work to get it. And the embodiments of Earth is kind of the complaint that people have around what you get out of the embodiments of Earth. But really, in my eyes, with Chain, with Seas of Agony, with these really powerful cards like Riftbind endgames, it just had it all. And there was design flaws in the hero itself. With Briar, I really don't feel that way. And if you look at this, in terms of what you can do, so the card I'd point to, right, is like Plunder Run.
Yeah.
Plunder Run, I think, can be a bit of an issue, but that's the same for any aggressive deck. It's the same in Katsu I felt before. It's the same in Chain. I felt Plunder Run was ridiculous. Like, it's that card itself kind of, in some ways, I think is bordering on breaking the principles of the design, whereas nothing else about that deck actually is. It's just a linear red line aggressive deck.
Yeah. So obviously the red Plunder Run is great, but most of us don't play Plunder Run for the color. It's really for the effect, and that is kind of breaking, I think, one of like a small tenet of the game is when you just play all of them regardless of their color, and it doesn't really matter. It's just whatever the written text is on the card. That's what makes it very strong. So if we do get to a place where these strategies seem too good, which I really, really don't think we're there right now. But Plunder Run has kind of been a consistent boogeyman, I would say, in terms of the generic slot. We could see that maybe being on the menu, but I don't think we're there quite yet. And then I know a lot of people call for Rosetta Thorn. I don't think we've seen the max use out of Rosetta so far.
I don't even think Briar is the best deck.
Yeah, it's not. It's definitely not, in my opinion. So Rosetta in like Viscerai and Chain is quite strong. I mean, specifically Viscerai is just so good, especially with the creepers and things like that. So I don't think that one's on the chopping block. If anything, it's Plunder Run, and there may be some sort of. I just don't think we're there quite yet. But if so, maybe Plunder Run.
I mean, I actually have some concerns with Spellbound Creepers, to be honest. That piece of equipment is it's like Storm Shadows on crack, to be honest. But we'll see what happens with it. I think it's also a really exciting piece of equipment and allows Viserai to play the game in a very different way, which is cool. And yeah, we're going to get into, I guess, deck selection for this calling as we get into the main topic of the pod. But we're going to talk a bit more about, the Runeblade heroes and, considerations and a bit about our testing as well around this event as well, because, yeah, we didn't think the format was clear-cut either. We never felt that Briar was going to be the default decision. We definitely didn't think Lightning Briar was going to be the default decision, which we'll talk a bit more about. But wanted to come back and address this because it really is, I think we've been pretty flat out, right? We haven't really taken a minute to kind of stop and really think about the weekend until we've gone to record this pod, right, Brendan? Like, we're on Monday right now. We just finished up yesterday.
Yeah.
But the Twitter Discord and whatever, like, it's really there. And I felt like I definitely heard it in the hall over the weekend, people talking about it. So I think we just wanted to address it.
Yeah, definitely. So with that, let's go ahead and head into the main topic of the pod with Nationals, and I guess starting on Thursday.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank John again for his question. I mean, John's question 4 weeks ago, we answered that question, but a great, I think, topic right now. So I wanted to come back and revisit what we actually said last time. And while we're on it, we talked about, Isolexia and that. I just want to shout out to Isaac Jensen from the Attack Action podcast. Good, friends of ours, Taylor and Isaac. We didn't get a chance to shout him out at the top of the pod, but Isaac obviously top 8 in Nationals, went on a monster run in Constructed especially, and was just, smashing through Briars on day 1 and day 2 and locked up, I think ended up like 2nd or 3rd seed in the end, and had a fantastic run through. Unfortunately, I saw the end of his game in the quarterfinals. Got a little bit unlucky at the end of the game there, but played very well, and just again, great job. Congratulations, Isaac.
Awesome. So heading to Orlando, let's go ahead and start it off. So Thursday's interesting because obviously that's when I meet Hayden for the first time. So on Thursday I get in early, and I come to the Airbnb, and Zach Bunn and Tim Bunn, his brother, come over, and we just kind of play test. And I told Zach's been the proponent of our group of Earthbriar for a long, long time. Just really stuck to that deck. That's like his deck, and he wasn't going to deviate. And we had all pretty much deviated to Lightning Briar at that time. And I told Zach, I was like, okay, if we sit here for 5 hours and you beat me, X% of the time, and you've got good arguments, and we rework the sideboard, all this stuff, I'll play the deck because I brought it as well. And yeah, he was getting me, and it looked strong, looked like it was going to be good. And I was like, you know what? I would rather have maybe the 45-55 into Lightning, which is where I felt like it was. And it almost felt like 50-50, to be honest, with certain cards like Consuming Volition and adding Disruption into the deck. So I'd rather have that. And then I felt like Earthbriar was just destroyed Bravo and Prism and these other decks that could show up as well. So we did that. I decided to go Earthbriar. And then we did the classic thing you should never do, which is we pulled up an Excel sheet, we started working on the deck, and we just went full mad scientist on this deck and just totally destroyed it. Just made it terrible. We went way too deep on the math and ended up, we didn't get to really play test our final product a lot, and it ended up being really, really bad, which we'll get into when we get into kind of day 1 of Nationals. But anyway, Hayden shows up, he comes in, a bit taller than I expected. But yeah, it was all good. Hey, what were your thoughts after your long flight over?
Yeah, my journey started on your Wednesday.
Yeah.
So my Thursday, got up at the crack of dawn on Thursday morning, Australian Eastern Standard Time. Jumped on a flight to Los Angeles. 13 and a half hours on a plane. Actually, wasn't too bad. The international flight, not too bad. Yeah. At the moment, they're very empty, just given the fact that borders literally just reopened in Australia on Monday. So flight was fine. Got to LA, chilled out for a little bit, had a bit of a layover in LA, flew to Orlando. That flight is dreadful, by the way. Yeah. That flight, I'm dreading it, doing it tomorrow on the way back. And then got to the Airbnb late on Thursday night. Met Brendan for the first time. It was about the height I thought it'd be, so that was fine.
First time I heard that one.
Yeah. Met Zach, met Tim for the first time in person, which was great to meet them. And then Dante finally showed up, and because me, Brendan, Dante, we have this Airbnb that we're staying in, not far from the venue, which has been fantastic. Did a bit of testing to help you guys out on Thursday night with the deck and going through that, and then that was kind of it. I needed to go to sleep. I mean, it was it'd been 24 hours that I'd been, over 30 hours that I'd been up. So I was pretty keen to get some sleep by that point.
Yeah. So just to close out that night, We keep working on the deck, make some very bad choices in the end, which we'll pay for the next day. And then, we're happy with our pick and we go to sleep. So let's head into Friday, right? So this is Nationals for me. This is day one of Nationals for me. And Hayden and Dante are just kind of, what are you guys, just hanging around the venue, playing side events?
Yeah, I'll just quickly talk about, so we had a plan. Obviously, me and Dante have a bit of extra time. Me and Dante had not locked a deck at this point. So just worth saying, we felt that we were probably going to play Lightning Briar. I wasn't as convinced as Brendan was on Friday about the Earth deck. But also, I had Viscerai in my bag as well.
Mm-hmm.
I also had Rhina in my bag, but I'd put that to kind of bet on the plane that I wasn't going to play Rhina. So it was probably going to be Viscerai or Briar. So I went and jumped into a side event actually on Friday just to play some games with Viscerai, just to play the deck. Actually, basically, this is very similar, maybe 5 card different to the deck tech that we've just put up. Tweaked a little bit since then. We had a week to test, obviously. So we did that. Felt pretty good about it. But ultimately, we'll talk about that in a minute in terms of like deck choice. But then, we just went and scouted Nationals. So after the draft portion was done, we just went and had like scout. Like just say we went and walked around the top tables just to see what people were playing. How much Briar was there? Yep, it's about 25% Briar. But then what's the next most played decks and what's happening at the top tables? Because those top tables, they're through to day 2. But some of those around the mid tables, they're going to be in the calling tomorrow. So just trying to get a feel for what decks might be there. Had anyone broken the format? Was it the decks we expected? That's all the things we were looking at.
Yeah, what was the Lightning Briar mirror tech, right? That was the dance to an extent. So we talked about Lightning Briar. I just want to bring it up as well. We really expected like a 25%-ish to maybe 30% meta show. But the question was, it was like, the timing was just too short between UK Nationals and US Nationals, where it's like, you could find a deck that beat up on Lightning Briar, but you just had so little time to shore up your other matchups, which is what made that hard. So there was definitely a sort of kind of dance between like, how do you break the mirror, right? Like, what's the mirror tech? And that was definitely a good thing to walk around and see. Like, I saw Flash Freeze, I saw Hope Merchant's Hood, then we saw like way different takes on the deck. Like, if you look at Tyler Horsepool's deck, like, it was quite different from a lot of Lightning Briar decks. He went like Rise of Lightning, he ran Command and Conquer in the mirror. He had like Blue Electrifies. I played some Briars in the calling, and we saw Razor Reflexes, Still Suffering, all this kind of stuff. So that was kind of really important, because you're taking something that's very discovered and understood. Everybody puts their twist and they put their tweak on it, and kind of, one philosophy really just pushes through that usually. So it was really interesting to see that on the day of.
But Friday, you're playing in the main event. You've got the Earth Briar deck in your hand, but before that, you got a draft. So you draft.
Yeah, I felt great. I feel really confident in draft after Dallas and Cincinnati. I felt like I was drafting very well at those events. But I get into a 7-man pod. Never played a 7-man pod before. I don't know if
I didn't know you were in the 7-man pod.
I don't know how much that affected me, but basically I ended up in Oldham. And I was just getting past some of the most ridiculous cards. I remember I was pretty open in pack 1. One of the biggest decisions I made was pick 2. So I pack 1 Deep Blue. Pick 2 was Yellow Weave Earth or a Overflex. And I tend to like to go Ice Lexi and this kind of stuff, because it's just heavily underdrafted, and I think it's so strong. You really, like, if it gets the right card, you can't fatigue it. It just absolutely can smash Briar, and then in the mirror, if you have like the Overflexes and Dominate, it's quite good. So I decided not to pick the Overflex because I'm a disciplined man. I picked the Yellow Weave Earth, and then I start getting I just see these ridiculous cards coming through on pack 1. Just nothing in Guardian is grabbed. Earth is open. I see Lightning dried up. I'm like, oh, there's tons of Briars here. And then on the wheel in pack 1, I'm getting like red Entangles, red Glacial Footsteps. And I'll pass like some early Glacial Footsteps. It's not like my favorite card by any means. But it really looked like Oldham was open. So I was like, wow, this looks fantastic. I had at the end of this draft, I had a full suite of armor. Like, it looked incredible. I was getting like late bucklers, all that kind of stuff. Pack 2 went fine as well. It was really like towards the end of like pack 2 that I was like, okay, there's definitely some other Oldhams here, because, the last cards in the pack ended up being just like Lexi cards, right? So I started getting those few unplayable class cards. I'm like, okay, that's fine. And pack 3 goes decent, but yeah, we start getting cut a little bit on class cards, ice cards, and earth cards. and just getting a bit more unplayables, get a bit too many yellows, like I didn't like. But I had like, generally this archetype that we play is called like 3 for 7, right? Like Tarek actually posted on Twitter a deck that looked pretty close to exactly what I was trying to draft. And that just solid set of blues, like 12 to 15, then just like constantly like 3 for 7 the opponents, like Snow Under, Entangle, all this kind of stuff. It's I feel like it's a really, really good archetype. Anyway, I felt like my draft went well enough, right? Like I felt like I had a good deck. And yeah, I just get into round 1, go up against the Briar. And it was one of the, so there ended up being, I think there was 3, I think there was two Oldheims at the table, or maybe 3, and then definitely 3 Briars, and then like 1 Lexi or something like that, if I can remember correctly. But yeah, I go up against the Briar, and it seemed like maybe like a weaker draft deck, but sometimes when you do have, if your Briar deck just kind of draws what you need in terms of like you get the red brambles with the earth cards, with the stirs, like it can go off. And I experienced this firsthand when I played the Dallas Calling. My sealed deck was quite bad, but when it drew well, it was amazing. But it could draw extremely bad as well, and then I would just lose the game on the spot. So got down to like 1-1 on that game, and then eventually just lost, which happens. So it was all good. I didn't try to fatigue. Maybe I should have, but definitely would not have worked in that matchup. It's just a lot of Stir the Wildwoods for like freaking 12 plus, and I was just like, oh my goodness. So it was a lot to deal with. So yeah, round 1 loss, doesn't feel good. And then of course my next match is the Oldheim Mirror, and it's the other Oldheim at the table. He's got like, I think it was like 39 playables. I'm down at like 32 because I'm signing out. Like, okay, I have to deck stack this guy. Set up my Glacial, chip him away, and I had it set up on the bottom of my deck, but in order to kind of set that turn up, and this is the sort of thing you run into with Tales of Aria, is like when you set something up on the bottom of the deck, usually you're sacrificing some sort of turn, some sort of pressure you could have applied on a different turn, and you can get into scenarios where that's the turn your opponent just draws the card, right? And so I was down at, I think, 6, and then he just hit me with a red Glacial, dominated, and I was just lost, unfortunately. So 0-2, terrible start. And then I go ahead and win out the 3rd match just against a Briar that actually wasn't in my pod. It was from another 7-man pod.
Wait, what?
Yeah. So the 7-mans, I played another 0-2 player from a different pod.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I mean, that's messy.
Kind of a nightmare, right?
Yeah, that's not ideal. I honestly didn't know that. This is the first time hearing of it, and I'm pretty disappointed, to be honest.
Yeah, it was definitely, I'm not a fan for sure, but it's okay. Like, it's just how it goes. I didn't even think about it during the tournament. But I was feeling a bit off this day. I don't know why. And I think the 2 losses definitely didn't help with that. I generally don't tilt, but I just felt like I was just not in my headspace, and I just couldn't kind of like come back to reality. I was just out of it. And that definitely showed in constructed. Like, I take my constructed deck, and I remember Zach texted me immediately after his first round as well. And he was like, dude, the deck feels off. And yeah, it did. Went from this deck that had a very...
You can say it. You said to each other, the deck felt like shit.
Yeah, it felt really bad. Like, it felt terrible. Like, it was doing absolutely nothing. The ratios must have been so bad. And I ended up playing against this Kasu, and I won, but my deck was doing, like, forward damage sometimes a turn. I was just playing, like, a dirty strategy on Earth Briar. It was bizarre. And I was like, I'm not sure about that. Ended up playing against Dash next round. I lost, which is, like, one of my best matchups. And then I can't remember what happened after that, but I played another Dash to lose my 4th game, so I go 2-4. And I remember that one was pretty funny because I went first. Or sorry, I think he went first or whatever. Basically, he Arsenal the Toma Fjendal. He had his first actual turn of the game. It's a high octane boost. Toma Fjendal, draws those cards, gains the life, and then boosts again. You get the extra action point. It's actually drawn another Toma Fjendal, so replaces, gets more cards. And he actually ended up doing, I think it was like 37 damage to me. And it was, ended up being a pretty close game, but I think after like 3-4 turns, I just crumbled under that. So at 2-4, I dropped. I was just like, yep, the tournament, I would at least want to just kind of like, poop the bed, as they say, is nationals, but turns out that's what it was. It happens, and I just kind of had to go refocus, try to come back to reality and just play better and get in the calling the next day.
Yeah, which, before we talk about, I guess, heading into the calling, because like I said, me and Dante at this point, we weren't locked into a deck. We had our list for the decks we were looking at. So we had a Lightning Briar list that we had So we had a Lightning Briar list heading into UK Nationals, then that came out, and then we adapted. But I guess the first thing before we talk about that, this Earthbriar deck, right? And so the deck that you and Zach ended up playing in Nationals, and Tim as well. Tim also played this in Nationals. I guess the question is for us, right? Like really, if we look back at it, right? If we look back at the testing leading into this, we weren't really confident about a deck heading into Nationals, right? Like it wasn't like a week prior, we see UK Nationals, we go, yeah, Lightning Briar, like we know about this deck, but we've got this deck that we feel comfortable with into Lightning Briar and is good against the rest of the field. Like it felt like we had the knowledge probably.
Yeah.
But we just weren't reacting in time. And ultimately, probably the testing in the past 2 or 3 weeks for us and the team, not great results, right?
Yeah, we had like sort of a macro organizational failure on that end. But so the Earthbriar deck, before we tweaked it and messed it up, right? It felt really, really good, especially into everything that wasn't Lightning Briar and Chain. It just had incredible matchups. Like it just destroyed everything, even when it was very unrefined. Like when I played in the PTI, like I just threw together some cards with a deck that Zach had been playing, and it just performed really well. And we could see that there was there was a chance there, and we had a choice to either go Lightning or Earth. And after we saw Lightning perform super well, we knew it'd be very represented. So it was like, okay, the only way we can play Earth is if we show up to Lightning matchup, because that's going to be 1 out of 4, right? And it seemed like we did with a couple key cards, but yeah, I think Lightning Briar probably was just the better pick than Earth on that day.
Yeah. So how do we get started? So we ended up playing, me, you, and Dante ended up playing the exact same 80 cards into the calling on Saturday. But how do we end up there?
So how do we end up on the Lightning Briar list?
Yeah.
So we have our list. We have our Lightning Briar list. So there was a lot of theories on how you break the mirror, right? And one of the main things we were testing actually was playing things like Force of Nature and a Pulse of Candlehold, which made it into a lot of lists, like the Pulse in the end. Just a really good card. Basically just trying to outvalue the opponent with those 3 blocks, which become 4 blocks with one embodiment.
They also have utility, right?
Yes,
yeah,
of course.
big utility.
So Force of Nature has incredible utility on something like a Plunder Run,
Lightning Press.
And Lightning Press. Yeah. It's so good. So we're pretty confident in that list. But I went up to Tarek after I kind of just got owned in the National. I was like, hey man, I think I'm gonna play the calling. Didn't do super well today. Can you I don't know if you have any teammates competing in this or what, but I'd really appreciate if you can just shoot me the list. And he shot me the full 80 and everything. So we went back, and I really appreciate that, by the way. We went back and we looked at his list. We worked on it. We changed like literally a couple cards, and then we just went directly off of that.
Yeah. So I think as the day went on, so just to go back, on the Friday, the side event that me and Dante were playing while Brendan and Zach were playing Nationals, Dante was playing Lightning Briar, playing our current Lightning Briar list. I think he was actually trying out some cards. He like Red Whisper of the Oracle.
Red Whisper of the Oracle, Scalata. Yeah. I think some other players ended up on Scalata as well, but Dante was in a pretty interesting.
Yeah, it was a bit of a Frankenstein sort of deck he played in. But he forwarded the event and he said, like, I feel really good on Lightning Briar. There's a few things I want to change. And then obviously we had the conversation about the list that Tarek had provided.
We were almost exactly on this. Our list was almost the same as Tarek's, except we had opted for the 3 blocks and he had opted for the Yellow Ravenous, which the Yellow Ravenous wasn't really something we had thought about.
True. Yeah. So then we all huddle up and we go, all right, what do we need to get? Are we missing any cards? So then we need to go and find some Yellow Ravenous Rappels. We haven't tested at this point. We're talking about the theory as we're like, I don't know, like, is the natural go again that good? We're kind of like talking about it. We're like, let's just go find the Yellow Rebels. Don't know if we're going to play them. Let's go find them. So we're doing like a big like scouting mission through all the vendors at Orlando, and they're like, no, we don't have commons with us. We don't have commons with us. We're like, people playing Arcane Rising Seal? No. We head over to I think Magnolia Games, one of the vendors of the US, and we go like, okay, have you guys got this? And they go, we have a few. Like we're literally like, we're about to open we opened some cases last night. We're going to go back to the accommodation, open cases tonight. So really nice guy there. Hamill actually hooked us up and they ended up opening cases that night and found the cards that we needed that were missing. So I just want to give a shout out to him because he really helped us out there for a few commons that, not really worth anything to them, but awesome and really helped us out. We hit back. We settled, like Brendan says, we changed a few cards. We were really high on Red Electrify, at least like
the 102.
Yeah, because it's just if you draw, you never want to see 2, but you see 1 in games, and it's like how you have these big blowout 5-card hands and you push, some mega damage. And if you ever have it on the ball lightning turn, it's pretty disgusting, right?
Or on the press, something like that. But I mean, even if not, it replaces itself, and then it's like it usually is forcing blocks.
It's half a lightning embodiment as well.
Yeah, I mean, double embodiment off of that is just so disgusting. But then again, like the downside, right? It costs 1. You don't want to see multiples.
Blocks 2.
Yeah, and then sometimes you draw that, and then you just have like the 1 attack action, right? And you don't have to go again, or you have the boots if you're gonna. It's not as good, right? So I think in our main in the mirrors, we ended up playing like 1 red's captain's call. This is to make rabble better. If we're playing 6 rabbles, we're really we're not playing blues or yellows. There's blue captain calls in some decks. That's why I say that. And we played like the 1 electrify. I was on 2 electrify for a while. No red captain's call in my mirrors, but then I switched about halfway through. And then the only other change we had to the deck is we had 2 blue ball lightnings for Oldhim and fatigue strategies, just because it's a very, very easy setup. You can, not easy, so it's theoretically easy to stack the deck after Sonata with like this sequence of turns that, I mean, you literally can't get fatigued if you can do that. The one mistake that we definitely did make, and we'll talk a little bit about this more later, is that we were boarding in like 70 cards versus Oldhim. You definitely want to play 60 cards. The idea, you want to get to your ball lightning stack as fast as possible. Diluting your deck and going up to 70, it seems like and we're talking fatigue, right? You're like, oh, I want more cards. You don't in this one because they can swing back damage, and it's all about maintaining your life so that when you do have the sting, ball, you can just take whatever they're throwing at you, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think I ended up on a different trend. I think I was the first to play an old time, and then we discussed it on Saturday. We'll talk about the round soon, but my thought process is you want to be on like 64 cards. I think you can run out of damage. It's actually kind of hard to fatigue that deck anyway, if you know how to play the in game. But I felt probably I didn't want all these like fluff cards that did nothing, and then you have awkward hands, your Sonata like math goes off, your non-attacks, and your blues versus non-blues go off. Right, et cetera. So I think in the end I was like, I think I'll play like 64 cards into those fatigue or presumed fatigue matchups. Yeah. But they could also not be fatigued, right? They could also be Bravo, and they just come swinging out of the gates, and you're playing 70 cards, and you've just got 9. You see less plunder runs at that point because you've got these 9 extra cards in your deck that you have to get through.
I'm playing like moving forward. I'm playing between 60 and 63 cards, like 100% of the time. Like it's so good. Like I don't know. I just want to get through my Sonatas, apply pressure, set up the deck, and keep pressure on while the deck is set up so they can't swing back at me. Get them to a life threshold where they're usually keeping 1 card in hand max because they're still blocking out, right? They're fatiguing. Yeah. And then you can just take whatever they throw at you, and then you hit them with a turn that is unblockable with their current life total.
Yep, exactly. So, yeah, that's kind of where we ended up. I just wanted to say, so as I said, I played Viscerai in that side of it. I think I went 3-1. I dropped a game to Briar. I actually think it was a weird game against the Lightning Briar that I dropped in that side event. I felt good about the list, but as we talked about earlier, the problem I had with the Viscerai list is that there was a ton of, like I say, Old Time and Bravo that looked like was going to show up in the calling, and even, Lexi I'm not worried about, but Old Time and Bravo. And I felt that had a pretty reasonable matchup into Bravo with Ellis with some of the tweaks. I didn't know about Old Time, hadn't really tested it, and was just really worried about playing this deck that I didn't know.
We were untested. That was one of our issues with Lightning, is it was all theory, right? We didn't have time we had time to play the mirror, which is important, right? It's a lot of your matches. But everything else was theory. Like when I played against Ice Lexi, I played against Oldhim, and I felt underprepared.
Yeah, for sure. And that's the reason why, like I say, talking about Viscerai just then, that I feel like I didn't want to play the Viscerai list into the unknown in terms of what we're heading to. As much as I tested that list and played it a lot for the last 3 weeks, there was some there's a lot of adaptations and changes heading into that event, and the Viscerai deck is just more complicated to play than the Briar deck, I think. So in the end, that's what kind of happens. Set the Viscerai list aside, but I was pretty close to picking up and deciding to play it. So yeah, that's Friday. We head to Saturday, get to the venue. We play the rounds. Might just run through like the rounds and kind of how it looked like, because for me especially, I played a lot of different heroes. So I actually played 7 different heroes on day 1.
That's crazy.
I didn't play as many Briar, so I might just quickly kind of run through my day 1 of the event, talk about yours, and we'll talk about just how the deck felt. Immediately felt really good about the deck list heading in. So as soon as I played my first round, I played into a Katsu round 1, and then I played I think Dorinthia round 2, and those first 2 rounds felt very good. Round 3 though, run into Old Time. This is my first time playing into old time, right? And as I say, went with the theory. I think I played 67 cards into that matchup. My old time opponent on turn 1 plays E-Strike. So pretty immediately obvious that this isn't going to be a fatigue matchup. My hands feel a bit trash to what Brendan's point before about playing these extra cards. And yeah, my opponent, who was Michael, who ends up winning the calling, was my opponent in round 3, is playing this like tempo old time plan into me. And so, yeah, I'm like looking to stack this like in-game setup. Doesn't really come together because I end up dying before that. I actually have a pivot turn where I try to pivot to push back on tempo and try and close out the game because we're pretty close on life towards the end, about 5-point discrepancy. And I take a hit, use my equipment to block. And then I have double Sonata in hand and just like whiff both the Sonatas. And then like Michael pretty easily closes it out from there. And then my last, then I play like a Bravo, I play a Rhinar, I play a mirror match, and that kind of just closes out the day. Ended up at X1 at the end of day 1. What about you, Brendan?
Yeah, so I started off against a Dorinthia, and I decided to go first, which in retrospect I think is very wrong. So that was bad. And then he blew me out with Singing Steelblade twice. So coming over, for the 1 to get the counter twice, and that was brutal. So he actually ended the game with 3 counters on his Dawnblade. A little tighter than it needed to be. But luckily, he popped the boost early, so that always helps. And I was able to squeak that one out. My most interesting match of the day was I played against like an ultra fatigue Oldhim. This was like round 3 or round 4. And I knew this guy was going to fatigue. Like, you could tell, like, as soon as I got there, I would call a judge over to just like clarify something. Wasn't there, like, we were pretty much on the same page. But as soon as I asked the judge about this question, it took like 10 seconds. He asked for like a minute or 2 extension. I was like, oh man, here we go. So yeah, it was totally fatigued. He didn't do anything except try to fatigue me. And I had to play a really hard game because I was playing the ridiculous amount of cards. And I wish it didn't work as well as it did, because then I probably would have sided down to lower cards on day 2 and I played the other Oldhim. But it was one of my best pitch stacking games I've ever played, I think. So I ended up having like I get through all my Sonatas. I set up Sting, Ball, and then I had 2 cards and then Ball. So I ended up arsenaling a Sting towards the end game. I have 16 card left in my deck, so I have to remember like a 16 card stack. It was legit. It was very, very challenging. And then on my turn, I draw the Sting Ball. Then I draw the 2 cards that are not Ball. And so on my turn, I go pitch a red, make a rune chant, and pitch the blue, swing sword. And then I go to draw my cards. Remember, so there's like 16 cards left in deck, and I draw Ball Lightning perfectly. So I have the perfect stack: Sting in Arsenal, Sting in hand, and then triple Ball. And he's at like, I don't know, it's like 13 or something like that. And then so he only swings for the hammer at me, and I have him dead to rights. And he had used his Crown of Seeds, and he only 1 Blizzard left in the deck, and he'd arsenal that on the turn before, right? And I just couldn't track it at that point. So I luckily had Tunic Resource, but I go Sting, Ball Lightning, and it goes Blizzard. Worst case scenario, right? Luckily, I'm able to pitch a Ball Lightning and Tunic Resource to still go Ball Lightning, and I think weapon attack at the end there. But yeah, so then it doesn't kill him. I have to end up closing out the game with another kind of sequence. But I had, we get to time the round is called. We have like 5 minutes of extension, of course. And then on the final turn, so we're at turns. It's my turn. He would have 1 additional. I set up, I'm down to like 10 cards at this point. Set up a sequence, perfect lethal. It's another Sting of Sorcery with a Ball Lightning, but has a few other things on the chain, and then I'm actually able to kill him perfectly on turns. And it was just a cool game to see that like perfect pitch stack come. It was also like there was like tons of people around, so it was a cool one. Yeah,
I came over to watch, and I was like, you were just wrapping up, and I was like, oh wow, what a game. And then I think that was like your round 5, right?
No, I don't think it was round 5. I think it was round 4. So round 5 is the one I lost. I actually ended up playing against the Chain, which is a brutal. It's not good matchup for Lightning Briar. But I was actually very, very ahead in the game, and then on his turn, he just goes Shadow Puppetry, Flock of the Featherwalkers, reveal Flock of the Featherwalkers, play Flock of the Featherwalkers, reveal a Bounding Demigod, plays a Bounding Demigod out of Banish, plays a Bounding Demigod out of hand, and then swings the sword. So couldn't get past that one. That was the final turn. It was brutal. I ended up losing it. And then I ended up going X1 on the day. And some other memorable matches. Played I think 2 or 3 mirrors, and they felt fantastic.
The list was really good into the mirror.
It felt so good into the mirror. But I ended up X1. Hayden was X1 as well, and then our friend Dante was undefeated.
Yeah, Dante really pulled it out there. Yeah, so I felt like got to the end of the day, awesome day as well. Like this is my first main day at the calling, my first North American calling. Met a bunch of more amazing people between rounds and after the event, which was awesome. And then we actually hit off. We have a bit of a team dinner on Saturday night, which is cool as well. So we get to meet.
Can I tell the story? This is hilarious.
Oh yeah, the story's great. The story's great. We're trying to have a team dinner.
Yeah. So Orlando, it's Saturday night, and I don't know. I haven't really been to a city that was this bad for trying to eat somewhere.
Well, we're not in the city. We weren't in the city.
Yeah, we're in the city, right? Yeah. We're in the touristy spot,
Disney.
Like in between like Disney stuff. I've never been in a place where I called so many restaurants and they just were all full. And then obviously our reservation is also ends up being 9 people, and it was just a nightmare. So Dante is Brendan, you ever heard of this thing called Del Frisco's? And Del Frisco's is a steakhouse chain. And I was like, Dante, if you can get because I saw it on Open Table, I saw they're fully booked. I was like, Dante, if you can get a reservation at Del Frisco's for 9 people, I'll buy your meal. So he goes, no problem. So Dante, insurance salesman or something like that, calls this guy. I've never heard them. This is the most silver tongue call I've ever heard in my life. He goes, hey, David, how you doing? So, gonna be a weird question, but I was wondering if you could do a reservation for 9. You can't? Well, but my question is can you pull any strings? It's David to call him back. So David calls in a waiter and asks him to come in early for us. We didn't really we had. This will lead to something later. David calls him back. This is the funniest part. David calls him back, and Dante goes, "Hello, David. How you doing?" And all I hear from Dante is just, No. Don't start with unfortunately. And he ends up getting us a reservation, right? So we have a reservation. I was like, wow, it's incredible. We go to Del Frisco's, and not only do we have a reservation, but we have the private room up top. And David comes out, this guy David comes up. He's like, where's Mr. Delfico? And Dante was like, David, you're my favorite man. It was, but yeah, it was an incredible dinner. You're surrounded by friends, and it was an awesome night, but it was just hilarious to watch Dante just talk himself into getting us that meal.
Yeah. To be honest, if I went home after that, if I went 0-4 the next day at the calling, I would have had an amazing trip. Not only Saturday, Friday did I get to meet a bunch of amazing people, as I said, our listeners, our viewers, I had great opponents every round as well. People were so nice, so friendly. I had conversations with basically all of my opponents post round about our games or about Flesh and Blood. And then, to meet people that I hadn't met, I've been talking to for so long and haven't met on Saturday night was just another great experience. So I was so thankful. And one of my favorite stories as well was that Zach is sitting in the corner saying, I really don't like ProQuest. I'm not a big fan of the ProQuest format. You've got XO to make it to top 8.
It's 8:30 a Saturday night. He's like, and he also, it's just funny. Just doesn't like doing the ProQuest.
Exactly.
Especially the constructed ones. So okay. Because I had to convince him in Cincinnati to do it. And with this one, he's like, okay, at least it's limited. So if I lose, I know I'm out. Doesn't take
done by 2, 3, 4 o'clock.
Exactly.
Easy. Yeah. And then foreshadowing for the next day, of course, we already said, but Zach ends up 9-0ing, 6-0ing the sealed, 3-0ing the draft, and getting his PTI. So, we're glad that he ended up clinching and playing. But yeah, so we get home. Don't think we don't do anything, right? Just we don't talk about the deck or anything. We're all feeling pretty confident. Head to sleep, show up, get there for day 3. I think we went to get there early. We had a couple of interview things to do in the morning quickly, and then we get into our rounds. I'll talk about mine first. So 4 rounds on day 2, right? Needing both of me and Brendan needing 3-1 to top 8, right? And probably don't want to be losing the first round, but we can probably lose any of the next 3 and still get in, right? That's where we're sitting at.
Maybe, yeah, it depends, right?
Yeah, break it. The top cut for top 64 is looking a bit weird, but there ends up being a couple of draws. Ends up being kind of funny.
I actually want to talk a little bit about this too, just because I know it's probably on a lot of people's minds. Is that in this calling they did go back to the old format for some reason? Maybe it was because they were more they're focused on nationals, but unfortunately, the 7 rounds on day 1 was pretty brutal. The bubble at X2 was massive.
Yeah, it was huge.
It was like 40 people or something. So that was not good. Really, really bad on that. I wish they would add another round. We had 4 undefeateds as well. So it was brutal. I just want to mention that because I know a lot of people kind of got irked by that because it a lot of people go X2 and for 40 of them it just works definitely not in their favor.
Yeah, it should have been 12 rounds because X2s missed the top 8 cut in the end, which it shouldn't happen. You shouldn't have X2s missing the top 8 cut. You shouldn't play a 2-day event and lose 2 rounds, in my opinion, and I think a lot of people's opinion in an event like this of this size and not be able to make top cut with your 2 losses, which is
This is like the consistent main tournament issue in Flesh and Blood that we are trying to get better at. It looks like we're making progress, right? They've added rounds recently, but for some reason it looks like we kind of backtracked on this one.
Yeah, really odd. So anyway, that happens. I rock up. This is round 8, right? Yeah, so round 8. I play Matty Rogers. Me and Matt Rogers sit down for our round 8 event. I know what Matt's playing. I know he's on Viscerai. I have a fairly reasonable idea of what he's trying to do in this matchup. We end up playing. The first few turns go pretty well. Feel like I'm pretty ahead. And then Matt just has the biggest OTK combo turn. He sets up 12 rune chants. Has this massive double Sonata turn off the boots to get the action point. Just ends up coming in for, I think in the end it's about 36 damage or something. And I end up having to throw my whole hand to block because I took 5-6 damage early on. And yeah, just out of the game from then. So tough start, right? That's a loss. Probably at this point, I'm thinking probably out of top 8 calling, but going to play through. It's fine. There's a chance with the way the breakers are and if people who lost, took their second loss in this round as well, end up winning out, that I can still make it because my first loss on day 2. On day 1, it was actually round 4. I think it's round 3, round 4. So there's a chance. So play out. I think I play a mirror after that, and I think I might even play 2 mirrors actually after that. And then ended up with a chain in the last match. We're sitting at table 5.
Same chain that I lost to as
same
well.
chain that Brendan lost to. Sitting there, final round of the day, thinking that this could be a win and in for either of us, just based on.
It was in retrospect.
Yeah, and it turns out it was a win and in. Tough matchup. Joshua, who ends up making the top 8, beats me in it ends up being close. But it didn't feel close after the turn 2, turn 3, and turn 4 consecutive Art of Wars back to back to back. But we end up pulling it back and it being pretty close to the point where if I draw a hand that's has a 3 block in it, I can block out and swing back and swing for lethal. Doesn't happen, unfortunately, and that's kind of where we end up. So end up X3 and missing top 8. But as it turned out, if I'd won that match, it would have snuck in at 8th, I believe. Would have pushed Matt up to 7th.
Yeah, for sure. So let's start with mine. Mine goes a little brutal. So I start off against an Oldhim. Also Oldhim fatigue, hard fatigue, but swinging a bit more aggressive. And what got me in this match was the too many cards. If I played less cards, I really think that probably would have gone in my favor. The reason why the cards were playing the more cards really hurt me here was that you have to manage your life to where you're able, we've talked about this already in this podcast, where you can take the hit and then play your sting, blah, blah, blah. And you can set it up pretty easily. I had it set up perfectly on my deck. I have the sting in arsenal, I have the sting in hand, and I have, a couple balls, and I'm going to draw, some more or something like that. And I just go down to a life threshold that I'm too low at. He ends up just Crown of Seeding on his turn and ripping the Natty Glacial and killing me anyway. But, if it had just been a swing, then it may have been okay. Thing was, it just took me so long to get down to my pitch stack that I just, I was just dying, right? Which is brutal. And you have to apply, enough pressure to where they can't be, glacialing you and doing things like this. So that was unfortunate. And I remember, when he made me for the win, I just flipped my arsenal in my hand and I flipped the next couple cards I'm about to draw. It's literally the perfect sequence, essentially the OTK. Unfortunate, but it's obviously just a missed sideboard mistake.
Mm-hmm.
It's bad theory going into this match that leaves you a bit unprepared. So it's okay. Losing the first one, never great. Then I go against Ice Lexi. So Ice Lexi, I felt very underprepared, but it ended up being a brutal match. Channel Like Frigid was on the field for 3 flow counters, and then one Channel Like Frigid was actually pitched, and then the other one was also drawn and put into arsenal face up, so it was just ready to go. And we saw 2 3 of a kinds in those few turns as well. I was just totally locked. Like I was in prison basically. Couldn't do anything. It was brutal. So yeah, but I did definitely misplay a turn earlier in the early game because I just kind of forgot that Blizzard Bolt was going to affect like a lightning surge that came after, and they got me pretty bad. But it's okay. So I'm out right at now X3. I'm out of the calling, but I just play the next 2 for ELO and just for fun. My friends are going to be playing out anyway. Play a mirror. Win that one, and then play against an aggressive Bravo and win that one as well. I really like the way I won the game against the Bravo. He was kind of blocking out right at the end, but I have I can't remember exactly what it is, but basically I have like Sting. I think I've had Sting, and then I had like Pulse of Candlehold or something, and then you play out the Sting, you pulse, or what was it? I don't know. You put the 2 balls on,
pulse
then
the ball lightning, you set up
the turn before,
turn.
and you set up. Yeah, you arsenal the Sting, and then you pulse the 2 ball lightnings, and then you have this like pseudo kind of pitch stacked S turn to win it out. So that was cool to do. And then I end up going 8-3. Hayden, I think you ended, right? You said
8-3. Sorry, I think I said 9-3. 8-3. Yeah, there was 11 rounds. Wishful thinking that there should have been 12 rounds.
Yeah.
And I mean, good news. Dante makes top 8. He's first seed. So Dante actually heads into the last round undefeated. I must demand Dante a little bit lax heading into that last round. He's getting himself an IP5 because he's late to his final match. He's thinking, I've already locked up top seed. I'm just going to dawdle a bit.
He was like 30 seconds late. He said he was mid wipe. Just heard himself on the intercom. Came running over, and then boom, IP5.
Yeah,
but like in the end, obviously it doesn't matter because he just ends first seed. But first seed actually turns out probably not where Dante wanted to be because you know what he gets to play against.
His worst matchup in the top 8.
Oh, Matty Rogers on the Viserai. So they're running it back from the Swiss round where Dante was able to win, and they run it back in top 8, and Matt is able to get his vengeance. I mean, that deck was built to prey on Briar, so pretty rough having Matt bubble in, and then Dante actually being first seed and having to play the worst one there to start off.
Yeah, tough one. But look, congratulations to Dante. Dante hits two top 8s this season of the 4 callings. So, great stuff from, I'm very proud of Dante. And obviously he's a big contributor to our team and what we do. So it's good to see him bank those 2 PTIs as well. And I know next time he'll get a trophy. It's coming.
So now we get to go to my favorite time of the entire trip.
Oh yeah, you were so happy about this.
So,
and rightly so.
My goodness, I've been trying to get Mr. Z-Bun a PTI. And
for those that don't know, just for those who might not know, I'm sure they do know who Zach Bunn is, but maybe just a quick, who is Zach Bunn?
Yeah, so Zach Bunn, he's the CEO of Team Covenant. He's played a bunch of other games before. A lot of people know them from their streams, and obviously they do the subscription service with the tokens, all that good stuff. So Zach's been playing a lot with us recently. We've been putting in a lot of work to get Zach his PTI, and he's been taking some pretty rough, kind of some unlucky beats recently. And like I said, he almost didn't play his Pro Quest. I remember he goes 6-0 in the sealed portion. I hear they were drafting. Me and Hayden were doing something else in the venue. We come back, and I hear like someone just the draft was terrible. I was like, oh goodness. He's like, yeah, it was 5 Briars. Was it 2 old times, 1 Lexi? Yeah. So I go walk over to the table. Mr. Zach Bunn is on Briar. I was like, oh goodness.
Playing into the 1 Lexi as well.
And then playing into the 1 Lexi, I was like, it's over. Turns out he wins. And then I don't know what he plays against after that, but basically we get back and he's in the finals.
Yeah, he plays I think he plays Briar. And the other Briar beats the Oldhime for him, the Fatigue Oldhime.
So no, he played the Oldhime, but the Oldhime didn't fatigue him.
Gotcha, yeah.
So Zach is in the finals against a Briar, and there was a key turn. Zach had lethal 10 ways out of 10. He had lethal, and he sat there and he was thinking for like 10-ish just to make sure he had he had it, right? Blocks with the 1 card from hand. Plays the Electrify out of Arsenal, Plume of Evergrowth, Deep Blue, Plume, Earthlore Surge, then plays, what was it, Vela Flash?
Yeah, Vela Flash coming in for 7.
Hold on, we forgot something there. What comes after the Earthlore Surge? That's an embodiment of lightning token. Yes, he missed it. He missed the embodiment of lightning.
Because he has 1 resource floating to come in with the...
It was lethal. It was so rough. And then we're like, he just punted it away, right? Luckily, his opponent's hand wasn't able to crack back too well. The Electrify gets 2 embodiments and gets his opponent down to 1. 1's a pretty brutal place to be. They kind of hit each other with wet noodles for a couple turns, and then Zach arsenals and Inspire Lightning. I'm looking at Zach's hand. I see him draw up and get the weave and has 2 block cards. I go around the table. I saw the opponent didn't have the lethal, and I was like, here we go. And then right as Zach plays his Inspire Lightning, I just took a little video of him playing, and you get to see, like, I put it on Twitter, and you get to see like his like kind of raw reaction. It was pretty awesome.
It's so wholesome.
Yeah, it was very, very wholesome.
Yeah, I actually wanted to say the funny thing about that turn. So I'm watching this game as well. We're all sat around watching. There's probably about 30 people, 40 people standing around watching at this point.
Yeah,
and we're me, Brendan, Dante, Tim, Zach's brother, all standing around. And this happens with the lightning token. And I'm next to Tim, and I go, Tim goes, maybe he's announced the trigger, but just hasn't put the token down. I'm like, I think he's forgotten it. And he has one resource floating, so he can come with the weapon afterwards for 2 and 2 to present lethal. It wouldn't have been lethal on the turn, the opponent would have blocked, but would have presented. And then halfway through his opponent thinking about the block, Zach, I've missed the token, right?
Yeah.
Ask the judge, missed the trigger, right? Opponent declines to put the trigger there. But then the opponent, they got a little bit...
Forgets about the electrify.
Forgets about the electrify. And ends up only blocking for 6, taking 1, which ends up being 4, which puts the opponent
down to 1.
Yeah, exactly. So a weird sequence of events that ends up, one mistake by Zach, but then Zach's opponent as well unfortunately makes the mistake to misblock, and then from then on has to block with 2 cards every turn, right?
Yep.
Because Zach's presenting lethal every turn.
He dies to Sigil, which Zach has
exactly
on his deck, and also obviously dies to the Inspire Lightning.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
pretty brutal, but it was it's awesome. Like, I'm happy it worked out. I remember when he missed that token, like, I started like pacing and sweating. I felt like, my stomach had dropped out of my body, and people were
I had left.
Yeah,
I had to go for a walk.
Yeah, people were consoling me. They're like, "It's okay, Ryan." I was like, "No, I missed the token."
I've been in that situation. I had a win in for a PTI event in Auckland calling, and the turn went very long, and I just was trying to play fast to get through time, and I missed my Snapdragon Scales.
Yep.
It's a terrible position to be in, and your stomach falls out of your body, right? But you just have to try and find a way to win the game. Mistakes happen. You moved on, and Zach ended up doing that and finding the line to win. So yeah, I mean, just an awesome result. So yeah, that's kind of the weekend, right?
Mm-hmm.
An awesome time. I think we hang around a little bit longer, and then, as I say, we go and catch up with some of our patrons, which was an awesome experience. And yeah, I mean, Orlando's been such a cool time. It's been awesome playing the calling. Ultimately, I felt really underprepared coming into the event, and I think I want to ask you a question, Brendan, as we sort of get towards the end of the pod, just about the process and things that would change. But I felt really underprepared. I didn't make this call until 10 days ago that I was going to come. I didn't have a deck that I really wanted to play. I really wanted to play Viscerai, but I didn't feel prepared enough for a couple of matchups and the change in the meta that was happening to the point where I wanted to change cards and didn't feel confident enough in those changes to test it in time. So that leads me to my question, right? Which is, in hindsight, right, after this event, you got 2 weeks leading to the event. UK Nationals is about to happen this weekend. We're going back 2 weeks back in time. Mm-hmm. What would you change about the process that we as a team, or you as Brendan Patrick, went through in those 2 weeks leading up to US Nationals?
So for me, I think that the issue happened before that, right? Like, the entire season, there was I just think that our overall strategy and organization needed to be a bit more targeted to finding the deck, right? Finding a deck and committing to it at least. And we were kind of just all over the place for a while, on the really predictable stuff like Reinhar's, and we were on the Viscerai for a little bit, and then the Briar. But yeah, if we were 2 weeks out, I think probably the right choice, like the easy choice and the right choice would have been just to be on that Lightning Briar deck. But it's hard because, like, we were looking at, Ice and stuff like that, but you could reasonably expect Prism and Bravo to be be a part of the meta. Yeah. And Bravo for Ice Lexi is pretty tough, and Prism for a lot of other decks can be pretty tough. We ended up not seeing as much Prism as I would have expected, at least on day 2 for sure.
Really dropped off.
Yeah, really dropped off. But yeah, I think for me, I would have just committed to the Lightning Briar deck. I think you could reasonably anticipate that there wouldn't be a large shift to counter it. There'd be a large shift to play it. Yeah. But the thing is, if you're going to win the event, if you're playing to win the event, it's hard to be like, I'm going to play that deck and then just hope to not run into like the best players that are playing a deck that counters my deck, which is what like Matt did, right?
Yeah. But I think so. It depends on what your goal is. First of all, obviously, if it's to win, you're probably going to have to beat the best deck that beats the best. Yeah, exactly. If you're playing the most popular deck, like that is pretty standard. But I think, and this happened. I mean, Matt lost the semifinals to a Briar. Dante beat Matt in the Swiss. Like, it's not that Viscerai deck has 100% matchup, right? But it is favored, and it has a strategy that works really well into Briar. So I think in the end, I think we were talking about this, right? And this is the decision that I came down to with like the Viscerai versus the Briar, is that in this current format where that Briar list is already really tuned, I think was the right decision for this weekend. I said this to Brendan actually, like, I feel like there's a line. I'm using my hands right here. No one can see this. Doesn't matter. But I think there's a line, right, of when you choose a deck and when a meta evolves, and you can either be like slightly ahead of the line, and you're in the right position, or you're slightly behind the line, and that being slightly behind can mean that you actually get really punished by how the meta evolves that weekend. And I think in the end, with the list that we had, we were slightly ahead of the line. I think if we played a different list, we would have been slightly behind the line. So I just think it was, come next weekend, I think that's a completely different story. I think it's hard to say that you'd feel as confident heading into that Saturday morning with that list as you would, next weekend at a different event.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like from a theory base, I wouldn't feel, but it seems like, in this region, people tend to like very much commit to decks that look like Lightning Briar, right? Like they're easy to switch to, they're linear, they're proactive, they're punishing, and they're just, they're strong. So we've seen kind of like in the history of the small amount of history we have of Fab in this region, is that people will stick to those decks, despite the theory being like, you might get countered, or there's a very high likelihood that people will target you. So next weekend does it switch? I don't know, but we'll see. Well,
I think we're progressively going to see that move. We're going to see people pick up the Viscerai deck. We're going to see people pick up. Oldhim just won the calling. We're going to see people pick up Oldhim. We saw Isaac Jensen top 8 with the Frost Lexi, with the Ice Lexi deck. Like, we are going to see this happen. It's not like it's not going to happen. So this meta is going to move. Will it completely shift next week? No, that's not how meta games work, right? They take time to shift. If it was, say, a Pro Tour next weekend, you'd probably see a really large jump, because the amount of like players and effort in those is at a different level, right? It's a different degree. But when it's maybe it's an open event, or it's even a nationals, people have already locked into decks, right? Like there's some logistical issues to change a meta that quickly. So yeah, and I think the last thing I want to say, because we're talking about like the theory, right, of going back and forth about the season and the failures, probably for us, that we're going to reflect on as we head towards next year and next season. Ultimately, there's like 2 schools of thought, I think, on how you approach a metagame in Flesh and Blood and Classic Constructed, especially a new format, is that you go and try and find the best thing, regardless of what hero that is. You try and find the best strategy, right? Or you adapt to a current strategy within the meta. Or the second school of thought, and one that I think we started exploring, but we probably did a hybrid of this, and it was a mess. I think really what happened is that you pick out maybe 1 or 2 heroes that you think have the strongest sort of set of cards right now, and are probably going to naturally play well based off the previous format, and you just explore those to their absolute depths, right, to find the best possible deck. And then as the meta changes with like UK nationals, things like that, then you adapt, unless you have a hero just does not play well into that. But it's probably unlikely. There's almost always ways to do it, and there is, if we talk about Lightning Briar, there's at least 4 or 5 heroes in this format that definitely have good strategies that they can play into that deck. So
yeah, definitely. So I hope you all enjoyed that first time meeting and the rundown of the Orlando calling and nationals for United States. Again, congratulations to Tarek, and was it
Michael
who won the calling. Just want to shout out the Arsenal Pass YouTube page. We do have tons of extra content there, deck text, gameplay, as well as a new section coming. It's going to be called State of the Meta, which we're planning to do weekly. This is basically just going to be us talking about what's on the cutting edge, right? What's competitive, and what's winning games, and what we expect to impact that, right? So just kind of a time in the round, but for the competitive side, and for the actually playing the game, for the metagame. That's a good way of putting it. So that should be coming soon. I think we're going to be filming that either tonight or tomorrow morning. Hayden and I are both on Twitter. I'm located at Brendan APG. Hayden is located at Fyendale, FYEN_Dale. And finally, just huge shout out to the patrons. The Arsenal Pass Patreon does have tons of exclusive content, like I said, with the sideboard guides, extra podcasts, live sessions, and of course the playmats, which hopefully we might in the future get a new run of.
I'm sure.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.
See you later.